Have you ever had a goal or a dream or an idea that was so big and so different that would put you out there in a high-risk and vulnerable way, that would rock the boat, that would go against the status quo, and it was so big that you wouldn't even let it stay in your mind? The second that idea gets there, you push it out because it's too much. Have you ever had an idea that you can't even speak out loud, or a dream or a goal, because it just makes you kind of feel gnarled in the stomach? It could be a personal dream. It could be an idea in your own organization or company that may go against or different than industry standards. Maybe something that's going to move the needle a little bit off of the norm, but it makes you uncomfortable. Well, I had a dream. I had a dream just like that I was too afraid to share, because it kind of went against the organizational and cultural norms of the Air Force at the time. So I had a dream to one day become an Air Force Thunderbird pilot. You know, there's 12,000 pilots in the United States Air Force active duty, and of those, every year, only 6 get to fly in the demonstration. It's hard enough to become a fighter pilot. It's even harder to compete and be selected and trained to become a Thunderbird pilot. Like, who am I to have the audacity to have that dream or that goal? And you know, every year, 3 pilots change over. It's a 2-year assignment. So every year, the Air Force sends out a message across all 12,000 pilots, and it says, hey, if you want to be a Thunderbird, here's the application. And every year, delete. I'd read the message, delete, delete. It's too hard. It's too competitive. It's too much. And I finally read the application that year in 2005. For some reason, I read the whole email instead of just deleting it. And it hit me that I met the qualifications to apply. And once that hit me, there was a little spark ignited inside of me, and I thought to myself, maybe I can do this. So I walked into the squadron the next day, and I said with courage to all the men in the squadron, I want to apply to be a Thunderbird pilot. And I have to say I was met with a lot of support. Standard, you know, Nicole, though, you'd be a great Thunderbird pilot, but you know you probably won't get picked. Yes. You know, Nicole, that they don't fly the F-15E, they fly an F-16. You may never come back to us in the F-15 community. You're going to go fly the F-16. You don't want to do that. You know, Nicole, they've never had a woman Thunderbird pilot before. And it was interesting because, to be honest with all of you, I had never even considered that they hadn't had a woman Thunderbird because it didn't matter. I'd always known an Air Force with women fighter pilots in it. It didn't seem like it was an issue, but in those moments and in those conversations, I realized it was an issue for some people because organizationally and culturally, this was different. This was rocking the boat. There hadn't been one like you. This dream is big. Are you sure you want that, young lady? And so I looked at the application. I told my squadron commander, I'm going to do it. You got to fill out a letter of intent why you want to do it. Turn in all your check ride grades. Luckily, the ones from pilot training didn't count, right? I got to turn in all this stuff, all my performance reports. And the last and most coveted thing that was weighted the most was a letter of recommendation from the first full-bird colonel in your chain of command. Now, this is intimidating. I was a captain at the time. This was a full-bird colonel. I now know that we full-bird colonels are a dime a dozen. But at the time, this was huge. So I drafted up a letter. You know, all he had to do was put his John Hancock on it, took the whole package over to his staff. I said, I'm applying. They said, yeah, lots of people on base are applying. There's a couple guys applying, you know, and we'll take your application. But he can only give one number one recommendation. I said, yeah, well, I drafted the letter. Here you go. All you have to do is sign it. Well, you know, Nicole, you probably won't get picked. You know, Nicole, it's really hard. You know, Nicole, they haven't had a woman Thunderbird pilot before. And then someone on the staff decided to just kind of up the game. And they said to me, you know, Nicole, they haven't had a woman Thunderbird pilot before. He only has one number one recommendation to give. We're not sure we want to waste it. Boom, right? Right, exactly, sir. That's exactly how I felt. Now, I don't think they had malintent, right? It was just that this paradigm, the cultural expectation in their head, that's all that was coming out. And so I was dejected. And I went over to the fighter squadron bar like a fighter pilot does on a Friday night. I was going to like maybe have a beer or two. And it ends up that the wing commander was there. Now, this guy's a brigadier general. He's like 6 foot tall, strapping fighter pilot. Like, he's like amazing. And he's coming over to talk to me. I don't even remember what we're talking about. But we're drinking our beers. Everyone's being manly, you know. He's looking down at me. We're talking about flying or something. And my squadron commander comes running over. He says, General, did you know Nicole is going to apply to be a Thunderbird pilot? And I was like, oh, ixnay, no. Because I had just come from across the street and I was making this decision that I'm not going to apply. Why bother? And the general was awesome. And he's looking down at me and I start looking up at him and I'm like, yeah, but you know, I probably won't get picked because it never happens. And then I said it. It came out of my own mouth. I said, you know, sir, they haven't had a woman Thunderbird pilot before, so it's probably not going to happen. All of these things that I had never even thought, I let other people put into my own head, was now coming out of my own mouth. And I'm just like looking up at him, yap, 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 yap. And he looks down at me, he's like, well, great, have you asked anybody or had anybody do the letter of recommendation for you? And like, you know, dagger in the heart again. And I look up at him and a little liquid courage, and I said, no, sir, I haven't, but I'm hoping that you'll write one. And he did. And he did. But I was even in that moment where he believed in me and was offering his support, I looked up at him, I'm like, but I'm not sure, sir. I don't know about all of this. And yap, 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 yap. And he looks down at me and he puts his hand on my shoulder, mostly to shut me up. And I remember him squeezing it. And he gave me one of the greatest gifts I've ever had in my life and a mantra that I have used for every success I have had since then, and one that I offer to you guys today. He looked down at me and he said, Nicole, nobody wants to lead a scripted life. Nobody wants to lead a scripted life. And in that moment, the general freed me from the paradigms and the expectations that other people had put on me, that the culture had put on me, and I freed myself from the paradigms and expectations I was putting on myself. I get to write my own script. You get to write your own script. And frankly, if it's something big and cool and audacious, don't write yourself out of that script.